Welcome to episode number 5. And this is going to be an episode about learning from our kids. And it's going to be a core principle where I'm going to be talking about rather than focusing on being a teacher, which I think is an important role to have as a parent, I'm going to be flipping it upside down. And rather than talking about parents as a teacher and the role of teaching and coaching, etc., I'm going to be talking about the role of the parent um, has in terms of being a learner and learning from our kids and having our kids mentor us. And this is a completely different perspective of parenting that I came across when my first child was born. And I was just blown away by the amount of things I was learning from my child. And every day I was just like amazed at how much I was learning from him. And soon this baby became my mentor, and I was learning from this baby all day long. And in a lot of ways, this idea of a child or a baby becoming a mentor and learning a lot, learning a ton from them has become a core principle and a foundation of my parenting in many different ways. I think a lot of times we think of parenting as teaching our kids or telling our kids what to do, or a position of authority. However, I think that is in a way a distortion of some sorts. And I think when we expect our kids to obey us, we're doing a ton of stuff where I think a lot of times it's beyond the kids' own maturity and even ability to really understand what that means. You see, I think a lot of the current modern day parenting approach is that we expect our kids to comply and to obey a system of rules. And we expect and demand our kids to respect us. And I think a lot of parents actually demand this respect from their kids. And the whole point, I think, of this modern day obedience centered approach to parenting is we expect our kids to obey us and to respect us, and that's their duty, right? And that's their responsibility. But I want to question this actually. And I want to say, why in the world would we expect our kids, especially young kids, let's say ages 1, 2, 3, or 4, even 5 years old, why would we expect them to respect us just because it's their duty to respect us? I think respect is a very advanced cognitive and learned behavior that requires, I think, a much, I guess, expansive maturity and level of cognition than what I think a lot of us realize. I think a more fundamental kind of need for kids is that kids need their parents, right? They need an adult in their life. And I think that's a much more fundamental kind of need that kids can understand, right? And parents can understand too. Our kids need us. They need us to be there for them. They need us for emotional support. They need us for protection. They need us for guidance, etc. But in terms of respect, I think that's actually something that a lot of times is just pushed on to kids from a modern parenting approach. Now, I think also a lot of parents, I guess they miss or underestimate the kids' ability or their hunger to do things on their own. A lot of kids, they are just focused and they have this innate desire to be able to do things by themselves, right? If you tell a kid like they have to do a certain way all the time, a lot of times kids just have this innate, ingrown ability to resist, right? Resist and to, in a way, to disobey. And I think in a modern day parenting approach, this disobedience or this willfulness to just to do things differently is often looked down upon. But I think in a way, in a kid's journey to become independent, in a kid's journey to grow in their ability to own themselves, to define themselves, and to grow and understand, right, who they are as a person. A key part of it is they're wanting to grow and do things their own way. And I think that is in tension with the modern day kind of obedience and compliance based parenting approach. Now, I think there is a role to having kind of obedience or compliance in some ways. However, I think it's completely, I think in a lot of ways, overemphasized, and it's done out of whack in today's modern parenting system. In my opinion, there are a lot of downsides to over focusing on compliance and obedience. I think a lot of it is compliance and obedience, in a way, is a result of a system and a system of rules that's devised by society and work and large industries and school and education and even parents to make things easier. For example, um, in the Industrial Revolution, you didn't want tens of thousands of people to do their own thing. They wanted them to follow the system, right, with mass economies and scale, and to do the same thing on the assembly line, etc. Or in school, you don't want 1,000 kids to be running around doing their own thing, not obeying the so-called set of rules. And I think that applies to modern day parenting, where parents don't want their kids to do whatever they want. They want them to buy into a system where the parents can have some type of control and to make their lives a bit easier. Now, I think the downside of this is that you get kids when they're so so ingrained in the system of compliance and obedience, and they're built and, in a sense, encouraged and nurtured in their house, in their school, in their work, and everywhere, that they're just not prepared as adults for a changing society where they are needing to find their own way. They're needing creativity. They're needing to find initiative. They're needing to find hunger and drive. And that's the question. It's like we push on our kids compliance and obedience, telling them what to do and demanding respect and obedience, but then we expect them somehow to have this amazing curiosity and creativity and drive in life, right? This independence, which I don't think those two things are completely compatible. Now, some people might say, oh, curiosity and adventure and drives, a lot of that is just innate. You can't really teach that. But I disagree. I think a lot of the curiosity and drive and hunger that kids have to be independent, to explore and to grow can be nurtured. And a lot of it, I think, is dependent on the environment the kids grow up in. Now, I want to kind of explore this a bit more. When we look at babies, like when I had our first kid 6 years ago, what shocked me in some ways was the drive and the curiosity that was innate in our first child. Like, he wanted to learn and he wanted to explore so much. And it's almost like you couldn't stop him from doing that, right? And I think the first temptation as parents is to say, oh, like, we need to restrict that and say, don't do that, don't do that. But when I looked at that, and I remember as a new parent, I would just stare at this 1 month, 2 month, 3-month-old baby. And I was in shock at how strong his desire to learn and to be curious. And it struck me at that point is like, if I step in and if I start to reprimand him or set up limitations too much or praise him, etc., then the focus will change dramatically from his innate motivation and desire to explore and to find, to grow as himself. And it will focus onto me as to try to please his parent or his parents. And I think that's a big mistake where parents can often overstep their boundaries, where they start to, in a way, think that their role is a role where they're using, I guess, different ways of praise and reprimand to try to shape behavior of kids. But by doing so, it actually changes the focus of a child, where they're no longer doing it just because they wanted to do it, right? They're exploring because they wanted to. There's something about exploration where you need to be bold enough where you're not scared to make mistakes. But when a parent comes in and says, do this, don't do this. Oh yeah, you're doing a good job, bad job, all this stuff. It changes the focus so much where now the kid starts to get insecure and starts to think that, oh, maybe I need to please this person more than just doing what I find to be interesting. Now, I think if we want to see our kids grow to become strong, curious, and exploring adults, focusing on obedience is overrated, and I think it can be counterproductive. Now, what's the way then? How can we work with our kids and not against them? How can we come alongside them, right, and not fight against them? And that is kind of at the core of why when my child was a baby, I decided very early on that I'm not going to scold, I'm not going to berate or punish my child. But on the flip side, that I'm not going to praise or bribe or manipulate my child's behavior either, because I don't think his focus should be on my approval or disapproval. I'm wanting him to find internal motivation. Like he's working on something. He's like, wow, this is fun, right? He's learning something. He's like, oh my gosh, learning is great. Learning is just awesome. And he has that internal motivation to continue to do that or not to continue to do it. In this video, however, what I want to do is I want to hone in on one key concept and share some stories. And the key concept is the importance of having a learning attitude as a parent. And I'm going to kind of go pretty out there and say, it's not just a learning attitude of learning from books or other parents on how to be a better parent. No, the learning attitude I'm talking about is an attitude where as a parent, I'm learning from my kids. And as a parent, I value what my kids have to teach me. And I think it's super valuable where I'm a student of my kids. And a new parenting approach and style comes out of that respect from the kid, for the kid or for the child. And I think this is at kind of the crux or one of the crux of kind of my personal parenting approach, because I think without respect for a baby and a child, I think the resulting parenting approach is going to be lacking, to say, for lack of better words. I think once you have respect and true respect for your child, your baby, your child, what comes out of that is going to be something, it's going to be really interesting in terms of how you parent out of respect. Now, here's some examples of what are some of the things that I've learned and I'm learning from my kids. So number one is strength. And I remember when my first child came out of my wife's womb, immediately he was crying like, he was angry, and he just had this strong will to survive. And I noticed it from the very beginning, and even the midwife who helped us noticed that this was a strong baby. And throughout his first year and the rest of his life, he's actually proven that to be very determined. And what I've noticed is that motivation and the determination, it's not an external motivation or thing. It's actually very internal, that he has a very driven sense to express himself, to survive, to go after what he wants. And what was fascinating about this was, I didn't expect that as a new parent, to see a baby day one, right? To have that type of strength. And it got me to think like, yeah, this strength that a lot of babies and kids have, and people in general, right, have, is not something that's completely, cultivated. It can be cultivated and encouraged, but it's something that goes deeper, right? And it's something that I've always tried to learn from my kids, that strength. A lot of times when, there's this word called strong-willed child. It's used in not the greatest, way, but the way, and people are always trying to say, oh, you have to, discipline the strong-willed child or show them who's in charge, etc. But in my opinion, I think when I interact with that strong-willed part or that determined part, I actually look at it very positively. When he wants something so bad that he just can't give up, right? I go, wow, what a strength and character, right? And sure, it might cause inconvenience during that time, but that is something secondary and minor. There's something I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to pick up with that strength. And I want to internalize that strength for myself to become a stronger person myself. Now, the second thing that I've learned and I'm learning from my kids is the fascination at absolutely everything. I remember when my first child was about maybe 2 or 3 months old, he was just fascinated at everything, at a ball, right? He could just stare at a ball, at textures, at colors, at just anything moving, and that fascination was so intriguing to me as a new parent. And I remember I would just stare at him and actually look at that fascination because I wanted more of that fascination, right? I'm trying to figure out what he has that's causing him to be so fascinated in something. And I'm trying to pick up a little bit more of that so I can be more fascinated at things in life. And through that whole experience of seeing both of my kids kind of being fascinated at everything and actually carrying on that fascination in different stages in different ways over time. But seeing that has helped me internalize and to grow my fascination at everything, is to realize that, yeah, really everything has a fascinating angle to it if you just look for it, right? A lot of times we're just not looking for it. We're just so, fast paced and so quick to just overlook everything. But yeah, my kids have taught me a whole new angle in life, to look at things differently and to see fascination with everything. All right, number 3, the third thing that I've learned and am learning from my kids is the joy of exploring. So yesterday we just came back from a few days, a 3-day camping trip, and we're exploring kind of the areas in Texas. And our kids just absolutely love camping because it's one of those times and places where they could explore and see nature and just be fascinated by the things around them. We ended up going to this place kind of near Houston where there was actually quite a few alligators, and it was done in the park was done or the state park was done in such a great way where it was actually pretty safe, where you had different walkways, but you could actually see alligators fairly close. And um, and my 6-year-old was just so excited to see alligators, right? And he was just dying right when we arrived. He's like, "When do we go to see alligators?" I'm like, "Well, we got to wait till tomorrow because it's at night." And he was going, and when he was seeing the alligators, he was like, "I need your phone to take pictures of alligators." And he was so excited. We ended up seeing 5 alligators over 3 days. And then we ended up watching some YouTube videos on the difference between alligators and crocodiles and alligators' nests, and just the whole fascination of what is an alligator, like, what does it do, how does it live, and seeing different birds and different types of ducks. And yeah, I got some books on birds, and just seeing them like spot out different birds and being fascinated by that. All of that stuff it's like, wow, it's like, how is it possible that kids so young can have such deep fascination, deep joy of exploring, seeing new things and going new places. And that has taught me, so much, where, to see that pure joy of learning and exploring has really brought me more in touch with the value, right, of learning and exploring. Number 4, the fourth thing that I've learned and I'm learning from my kids is the joy of creating. Yeah, we've always tried to, let our kids, create stuff, draw stuff, explain stuff. And one of the things that, is going on right now is our kids are getting into drawing more, and we're finding them like, doing some crazy drawings. And our 6-year-old is just, it's not so much the skill of, oh, this drawing looks amazing per se. It's like, that's not what we're focused on. We're focused more on expression and kind of what kind of stuff, or is he free to just create stuff. And our 6-year-old right now is drawing all of these like crazy diagrams of complicated stuff where they all tell a story, and then he likes to explain the story to us. And it's fascinating that he's always had this thing of wanting to create, and that is so powerful. And I think sometimes as adults we think that, oh, we should create, or we have obligation to create, or we have an obligation to go to work or do work, or make money, etc. It gets all convoluted by so many different things. But as a kid, there's something pure about understanding the joy and value of creating something, right? Of drawing something, of explaining something, and jumping around. And that's what one of the things my 6-year-old and 3-year-old they do, is when they find something interesting or just so learning, like they learn something or they create something, they just jump around, like, and it's so awesome to see. Like the jumping around is so free flowing, it's so natural. Like no one has told them to jump around, they're just doing it because they're so excited that they've created something or they learned something. Number 5 thing that I've learned and am learning from my kids is unlimited imagination. And one of the things we've done since our kids were just 1 year old or so is we like to tell stories, and we always like to kind of create our own stories, and we also give our kids the ability to, or the chance to create their own stories. And so this is kind of like a bedtime thing where a bedtime ritual where we tell stories, and we let our kids tell stories. And I remember about a year and a half ago, our youngest was about 1.5 to 2 years old. I'm not sure exactly when, but she was starting to pick up words and to say something. And I think it was a little bit past 2 where she started to be able to finally kind of piece together some sentences with a lot of effort. And she was, hearing kind of these stories and seeing, her older brother kind of tell stories and having this fun kind of bedtime, ritual and stuff. And she wanted so bad to tell her own stories, but she was having such a hard time piecing together, right, the pieces to make these stories. And I remember, like, we would let our 6-year-old tell a story, we would tell stories, and then our 2-year-old would be dying to tell a story. So she'd be like, let me tell a story. And then she'd tell a story, and then all of us would be like hanging on the next word because some sentences would take quite a while, and she would piece together a few words. But it was so awesome to see a few things. One is that, like, the power of a 2-year-old imagining, creating a story, like being fascinated by storytelling and engaging, and just seeing kind of that family experience come together. And the imagination, right? The power of imagination from such a young age. And in this way, and also in all of these areas and many more areas, my kids have become a mentor for me. And in a lot of ways, I learn far more from my kids than I think I teach them. And while I do believe I have a role, and a very important role, to teach them and to coach them and to mentor them and to guide them, etc., I think there's something um, far more magical and mystical, and maybe perhaps significant than just kind of this top-down, parent, to kid, teaching, guiding, protecting role. I think there's something mystical in the relationship between a parent and child, where as much as a parent thinks that they're giving to their kids, in many ways, I think the parents can, if they're open to it, in terms of their ability to really pick up and to appreciate things. I think parents can receive so much more, actually, from their kids. And it's kind of, in a way, life-changing in a lot of ways. And I think I can say as a parent that perhaps one of the greatest lessons, the most valuable lessons and principles and ideas I've carried in life has been through what I've learned from my kids. And a lot of this stuff isn't just, because I, glance at my kids, but it's more because I'm trying to be involved and engaged on a deep level with my kids. And this type of learning and respect for my kids comes from kind of an osmosis, kind of a really deep kind of engagement with my kids, where, yeah, I'm not going to be respecting them if I'm not picking up, right, all the things they're doing on a very deep level, and on a very, in a way, introspective level too. And I think a lot of that, our modern day society, we're just so fast paced, where we miss out on that introspective nature of parenting, right? We're just, and I understand there's a lot of pressures in life, with work, with finances, with relationships, with society, with parenting, etc. So I'm not discounting that, but I think there is a level where, a different type of parenting that can be born out of a stillness, born out of introspectiveness, born out of a respectfulness to the child, born out of a parent as a learner, right? I think a lot of that, I end up personally, I think we end up personally as being able to look at babies and kids not as like less human or smaller human in any way, but no, they are fully human. But in a lot of ways, they could be, in fact, even maybe more like maybe the purest of humans in terms of how they really interact with the world and how they go after things and who they are. I just think that this is oftentimes underappreciated in modern day parenting, but is such a crucial role in developing the respect that is needed to really treat our kids with ultimate respect, to treat them as mentors, and then to build a parenting approach out of that, out of true respect. Anyways, I wanted to kind of share this kind of angle with you guys. And I think, I think it's just a cool way to think about parenting, and I'm hoping that it's helpful for you guys. All right, I want to just go ahead and take a comment here. Julio Chow says, so small, but already one of my favorite YouTube channels. Can't wait for the full episode and discussing its wisdom with my wife. Love from Germany. Yeah, I mean, this channel is kind of a fun thing for me. And I think, in different ways. It's a different angle. It's a different approach, right? My other channel with investing and finance, has different topics, different angles, and it's fun. And I find great meaning and value in that. But I think there's something about parenting that, yeah, is not talked enough about in terms of having a different approach than what is typical, and to go deeper, to have a more engaged, a more meaningful, right? A more just fun time parenting. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from in the angle that I have. All right. I want to thank you guys for joining on this episode, episode 5. If you haven't, you can go ahead, check out my past episodes as well. Each episode has a combination of parenting principles together with kind of stories and real life examples. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in my next video. Thanks.